Welcome back. It's 10:45 on Radio 2000, and as I said, it's Inspirational Wednesday today. And the Minister of Finance last week delivered the budget speech, leaving a lot of us more frustrated by, one, the state of our economy, the state of our purses, and of course, many people wonder if wealth or even financial freedom is ever attainable in their lifetimes. Maybe you are always in debt or just getting by. How do you rise above that? We have in the studio business author, professional speaker, innovation strategist, and new daddy, Douglas Kruger. He had a baby 4 days ago. Congratulations, by the way. And he says, thinking like a poor person will keep you poor, and thinking like a wealthy person will make you wealthy. What are the differences between the two ways of thinking, and how do you use them, and how can think like a wealthy person change our lives? How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. It was, in fact, two...
I don't know why your microphone is not working.
Am I not on there?
No.
Shall I just really project and speak a little louder?
No,
there
take
we
that
go.
one. There we go.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Good to be back in business.
It's good to be back in business. I mean, you know, the shifting our thoughts about money and seizing control of our financial destiny. Please elaborate on how that works. Because if it's all in my mind, how come I'm still not rich?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you mentioned the budget speech there, and wealthy people generally concur that the number one threat to your wealth and your prosperity is anything to do with the government. And in fact, the number one threat from the government comes in the form of taxation. It takes a chunk of your money before you even get to see it.
Before you even say hello to it, they've helped themselves out to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So our starting point for today is to say anything to do with reliance on the government is already sending us in the wrong direction in terms of building our personal wealth and prosperity. Step number one is to take charge for yourself. And it's quite difficult intellectually. As you just said, it looks pretty hopeless and pretty bleak when you look at the broader picture. But when you get out there onto the roads of South Africa and you count the Range Rovers and the Porsches and the Mercedes-Benzes...
I feel lazy, actually. I look around and I'm driving in my jalopy on the road, and I look left, everyone's got a big, huge car. I look right, everyone's got... I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
And the point is there is money in abundance in South Africa and in the world in general. And in fact, I attended a presentation the other day where an economist was saying that actually South African organizations, companies, have record levels of reserves right now. They're not spending because of political uncertainty, but they are as wealthy as they have ever been. So in terms of, is there money out there? Goodness me, there is money in abundance. We just need to know how to tap into it. That's the trick.
So when you say we have to have a healthy attitude towards money, what is an unhealthy attitude towards money?
Okay, the first person who ever really summed this one up in a beautiful way for me was Malcolm Gladwell, when he spoke about the differences between very poor people trying to escape poverty versus the middle class and the rich. And he uses a phrase that I absolutely adore. He says, you've got to represent yourself. And he uses a simple analogy to show how powerful this is. A poor family takes their kid to, say, for example, a dentist, and they will instill in him, en route to the dentist, the belief that this is an authority figure to be feared and obeyed. Now, on that same trip to the dentist, the middle-class or wealthy families are telling the kid that this is a resource to be utilized. The doctor is there to help you, and if you have any questions, you must ask the doctor. Now, that may sound like a small distinction, but amplify that over the course of a life, and you have one side of the world who looks at institutions and authority figures as something to be feared and obeyed. And you have the other side of the world who looks at exactly the same thing and sees only resources to be utilized. So representing yourself is step number one. If up until this point you've had a difficult background, you've been struggling, you've gone through a great deal of poverty, and really life has given you an unfair rap, what we want to do is go, this is now day one of taking charge. That is in the past, and it's sad that it happened and it's tragic that it happened, but I refuse to carry that baggage with me. Here on out, I'm going to represent myself, because that mindset matters above all.
Yeah, but dealing with debt and debt in carrying habits or behavior, because when we were talking, one of our listeners said, I find myself, over and over again getting into the cycle that is unending. I'm in debt, I get out, I get back in, I get out, I get back in, and of course, I can't save.
Yes, absolutely. And I having done a lot of sort of survey on wealth literature and having spoken about it for a number of years now, my take on it is this. While it is important to save, I mean, there's no doubt about the fact that it's important to save. Saving in and of itself is not going to get you out of debt, and it's not going to make you wealthy.
It's just going to see to those rainy days.
Realistically, there's another sort of guru that I quite admire who talks about how saving results in wheelchair wealth. In other words, you absolutely can become very rich by saving.
But you'll be in the wheelchair
provided you're willing to buy your yacht when you're sort of 50, 60 or above. So realistically, what we actually want to do is to focus on generating more. Saving is incidental but important. So we do it in the background and we make a habit out of it. But you do not save yourself rich. You have to generate more if you want to break the cycle of poverty and debt, and if you actually want to become wealthy.
Yeah. So, so you say you have to generate more, which means look for another job for some people.
Okay, so
or do something extra. What does that mean, generate more?
The key to this one is raise the value of what you do.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the phrase, get another job.
Yeah.
Yes, you can get more valuable jobs, but the reality of the thing is also you're not going to end up mega wealthy working in a job.
Yeah. 7 billion people, you said the last time you were here.
Absolutely.
In the world, none of them are rich from working for somebody else.
Yes, and if you look at the self-made billionaires, almost every self-made billionaire on earth is a first-generation wealthy person.
Yeah.
So these are not people who have, inherited
it.
and so on.
Yes.
So the key to this one, let's put the idea of changing your jobs and getting a better job onto the sideline. The underlying principle is raise the value of what you do.
Yeah.
Now, you can do that within a job. So say, for example, you are employed and it's a very basic job.
Yeah.
What you're going to want to do is find ways to make yourself more valuable.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is not just to do the bullet points on your job description.
Yeah.
You want to find out what are the goals of that organization and how can you help that organization to make more money. To attain those goals, to make more money, to prosper.
Yeah.
And you want to be talking to your supervisor, your boss, and so on about how you can go beyond your bullet points and raise your value in the organization. But now that's one option. To really raise your value, what I would tend to say is, start off by getting a basic job and figuring out the world of work when you're young. But I would say by the age of 23, 24, maybe 25, I would start saying, think about starting your own company. Now, in South Africa, the stats say that 65% of our youth do not believe in entrepreneurship.
Yes,
they say it's a bad idea.
They want to be hired by somebody.
They want to be hired. Someone needs to pay them a salary. And 65%, what we're saying there is most young South Africans are on the wrong track in terms of becoming wealthy.
And they're in the majority.
Yes, absolutely. They are. And in fact, here's another sort of scary majority number. Most people who become wealthy in their lifetime are voracious readers. They're always trying to get answers. And interesting thing is, it doesn't actually matter what they read, but these are people who are always trying to get information in. They're trying to solve the problems they're facing. Now, Exclusive Books the other day released a stat that says that less than 1% of South Africans go into bookstores and buy books. Less than 1%. I mean, that's almost none of us.
Yeah.
So if, in terms of changing your wealth positioning, if you are buying books or even just reading articles, reading magazines on wealth, you are arguably ahead of 99% of the
population.
Country.
Yeah. So let's do this then. Let's get some tips and advice on how to create good financial habits. The most important thing is, as you said, grow your portfolio if you may.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The starting point is to find out which questions we need to ask. So now when I talk about reading about financial literature, the first thing that you're going to notice is if you pick up more than one book on becoming wealthy, say you buy 2 and that's all, you're going to notice that they don't agree with each other. They have different answers.
Yes.
Now that actually surprisingly doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What does matter is the questions they're forcing you to ask.
Yes.
So they may come, 2 different authors may come to do 2 different answers about how you approach a certain problem financially.
Yeah.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. It's about the question that both of them are tackling. Now, the reason that's okay is that the world changes all the time. I mean, jobs change, the economies change. One day you're working at a McDonald's, next day McDonald's changes everything and it's automated and the job is gone from the world. So it's not the answers that matter, it's the questions. And one of my observations as well is that poor and middle class families tend not to talk about money in their family circles. The only time they do talk about it is to moan that there's not enough.
Yes.
Now, that's not the same thing.
And to tell their kids, money doesn't grow on trees.
Money doesn't grow on trees, absolutely. Yes, it does, actually. It's out there in abundance.
Yes.
So our starting point is to have the debate. Read the literature, ask the right questions. The answers themselves are actually not as important as the grappling with the correct questions.
Yeah. And then you say you think yourself wealthy. What does that mean? Or versus thinking yourself poor?
Okay, so there are some very different, very specific differences in mindset between wealthy and poor, and also between first-generation wealthy people. So we're not just talking about people who have inherited, we're talking about people who have done it for themselves. The first one I mentioned before is the idea of representing yourself. You go, I am not waiting for the government, because globally, the government is the number one threat to your wealth, and it's even worse in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
Measurably, and I quote the numbers in the book that prove that the number one wealth annihilator for sub-Saharan African populations is their own governments.
In South Africa just last week, people who earn over 1.5 million rands a week were told, listen, buddy, you're going to be taxed 45%, which is almost half of what you earn.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about taking charge, and the second thing is it's about not feeling like a victim.
Yeah.
Now, some people are legitimately victims. You've had a difficult past, you've had a difficult political past, and you are entitled to feel that way. However, it's not useful. Once you take charge of your own life and you say, my wealth potential is entirely in my hands, then you start behaving differently. Now, the next little sort of motivational idea that I throw into the mix there is that if you're in poverty right now, you are not separated from wealth by a number of years. You are separated from wealth by a number of actions. Now, that changes things, because instead of saying, well, maybe 10 years or 20 years down the line, my life will change, it's saying, no, your life changes when you take the correct number of the correct actions. For example, starting to raise the value of what you do. Now, if you're working in an organization, that's helping the organization to meet its goals and thereby becoming more valuable. If you're an entrepreneur, it's a very similar dynamic. It's about learning to charge correctly. And here's the interesting thing. Most first-time entrepreneurs who come from a poor background charge too little. And they make the mistake of actually making themselves look too cheap to be taken seriously, and then they end up working too hard for too little money. So genuinely, the first mistake that young entrepreneurs tend to make is they actually charge too little for what they do.
Because perhaps the thinking is, I don't know when I'll get this money again.
It's thinking based on desperation, and that's how the thinking keeps you poor. So this is a very practical example of exactly what the title of the book is saying. Is your thinking keeping you poor? Let's say you're 22 years old, you launch your first company, and you're out meeting with your first client. Now, you are desperate to land that deal.
Yes.
Because in the back of your mind, you're thinking,
I need to buy groceries.
Yeah, and this is the only deal in the universe. It may never happen again.
Yes.
So thinking out of that desperation, you're going to make two mistakes.
Yeah.
The one is you're going to charge too little and actually look amateurish.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, probably land less deals. And the second is that if you do get the deal, despite the fact that you're too cheap, you're going to earn too little to make your business viable.
Yeah.
So you actually want to then say, rather than say, how do I deliver the thing that they're asking for? Let's take a practical example.
Sure.
Say that you start up a little design company. You've got a computer, you want to do some branding, maybe create a website, things like that.
Yeah.
The wrong way to think about it is to say, all right, I work for, say, 100 Rand an hour, or even 200 or 300 Rand per hour.
Yeah.
The right way to think about it is, what is my client's goal? What are they trying to achieve, and how can I help them to achieve that?
Goal, yeah.
Because that may be worth 100,000 Rand.
Yeah.
As opposed to 200 Rand an hour. It's a radically different way of looking at the world.
So we raise the value of what it is that we do, whether it's in a company or whether we're entrepreneurs, and what else do we do?
Okay, so we want to be learning from the people who have actually done this. And I'm going to give you a free resource here. So my idea is go out and read as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
But the worry, of course, is if you're struggling with poverty, how do you afford the darn books?
Yeah.
Now, what I've done in the case of this particular book is I've made the entire thing available for free on my website. Article by article, chapter by chapter, page by page.
Okay.
And it's unusual. All my other books are in the stores and they're charged and so on. This one's in stores as well.
Yeah.
But if you cannot afford it, I want you to have these ideas for free.
Okay.
www.douglaskruger.co.za, the articles page.
Yeah.
And share them freely, get them out to as many people as you possibly can. It's politically incorrect, I'll warn you in advance. Okay? So I'm not trying to mollycoddle people, I'm not trying to make you feel nice. I want to raise people out of poverty. And it's got sound research that says this is what we do wrong, here are the threats, here are the traps, and here's what you can do correct. So it's free, go and get it.
Okay, so we're going to read, and we're going to raise the value of what we do. We're going to learn from those who have done it before, and we're going to go to your website, www www.douglaskruger.co.za, and it's not PC, but it will raise the value of our wealth.
That's the goal. Let's change lives rather than being nice.
Fantastic. For a guy who hasn't slept for a couple of days.
You're pretty on point.
With those real English sentences, I'm not sure at this stage.
For a guy who hasn't slept for a couple of days, you did great. Congratulations. Well done. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for the lessons.
Lovely, thanks.
Thank you. Remember, Douglas's website to go and get those all important tips, www.douglaskruger.co.za. Don't write to me and say he's not PC. He's already told you he's not PC. He's not in the business of being PC. He's in the business of getting you to be rich. It's 11 o'clock. Time for news. Thank you, Douglas.